On a cold afternoon in Colorado, a successful but lonely woman sat quietly on a bench until two little siblings in torn clothing walked up to her with a question so heartbreaking it stopped her breath. They didn't ask for money, and they didn't ask for food. They asked if she could take them home. What happened next feels less like coincidence and more like a miracle placed in her path at the perfect moment. Before we begin this emotional journey, tell me, where are you watching from today? And if you love stories of hope, faith, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel. Late autumn in Boulder, Colorado, had a way of making the world feel both vast and unbearably quiet. The air carried a sharp bite, cold enough to slip under collars and sting exposed skin. Wind chased dead leaves down the sidewalks, scattering them in restless spirals that clicked against the pavement. The sky hung low with heavy gray clouds, the kind that warned of an early snowfall, and the entire city moved with a hushed urgency as people rushed indoors seeking warmth. The plaza outside the modern glass office towers felt especially empty at this hour, save for one woman sitting alone on a stone bench. Laura Bennett, 35 years old, rested there with the composed posture of someone accustomed to navigating high-pressure environments. Tall, slender, and impeccably put together, she wore a tailored navy coat that hugged her lean frame and a soft beige sweater beneath it. Her long chestnut brown hair was tied back in a loose knot, though the wind kept tugging out small strands that danced around her pale cheeks. Her dark green eyes, usually sharp and focused, now carried a subtle exhaustion, the quiet, heavy kind that built up after years of pouring herself into work and having no one to share life with. She had just finished a tense afternoon meeting, and the emails piling up on her phone only added to the weight on her shoulders. She sat there rubbing her thumb along the edge of her phone screen, taking slow breaths, trying to let the cold numb the stress from her mind. But peace never lasted long for her. Before she could respond to another email, a small voice, thin and hesitant, drifted through the whipping wind. "Ma'am, we need to ask you something important." Laura looked up sharply, surprised. Standing a few feet in front of her were two children who looked completely out of place in the corporate plaza. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of them. Both thin, both wearing clothes that had clearly been worn far too long, both carrying an air of quiet fear that shouldn't belong to anyone their age. The older child, a boy around 10, stood protectively in front of the younger girl, angling his body as if acting as a shield. He had a narrow, angular face with soft features that had hardened prematurely from worry. His dark brown hair stuck out in uneven tufts from lack of proper grooming, and his large brown eyes were sharp with caution. He wore a faded yellow t-shirt beneath a frayed gray hoodie, and his jeans, torn at the knees, were not stylish but simply worn thin. His sneakers were 2 sizes too big, probably handed down from someone else. This boy, Ethan, carried a seriousness in his expression that shouldn't belong to a child. Beside him stood the younger girl, no more than 7. She clung to his sleeve with one small hand and gripped a worn, stuffed rabbit with the other. She had soft blonde hair that had once been tied into a ponytail, but had mostly fallen loose, framing her delicate, slightly dirt-smudged cheeks. Her blue eyes carried a fragile hope mixed with fear, as if she wasn't sure whether approaching Laura had been a mistake. She wore an oversized beige jacket, sleeves covering her hands, and a green t-shirt peeked from underneath. The girl, Lily, looked like she had learned to stay small, quiet, unnoticed. Laura's brows softened, concern pushing aside her stress. "Are you two all right?" she asked gently. The boy swallowed nervously, his voice tight and polite. "My sister..." She said you look like someone kind. He took a shaky breath. She said maybe you could help. Laura felt something tug inside her chest. What do you need help with? The boy's eyes darted away for a moment before he forced himself to meet her gaze again. We wanted to ask if you could. His jaw clenched with fear, uncertainty, and a desperate courage. Then he said it. If you could take us, as your kids. Laura blinked, stunned. I'm sorry. What? Ethan stood straighter, pushing past his fear. We don't have anywhere else. Our dad died from being sick. Our mom left before that. And the place we're staying now. His voice wavered, but he didn't stop. They said they might send us to different centers soon. They don't have room to keep us together. The girl pressed against him, her small voice trembling. I don't want to go without Ethan. She lifted her eyes to Laura timidly. I just want someone to call me their girl. Laura felt her breath catch. That single sentence, spoken with such raw innocence, struck something deep inside her. Something she didn't even realize was still alive. She had never had children. She had never had anyone who needed her. She had success, stability, recognition, but no one who looked at her with hope in their eyes. The boy hurried to add, as if afraid she might walk away. We won't be trouble. I can help clean, and Lily's good at being quiet. I just can't let them take her away from me. Laura could see the promise in his eyes, one he had made far too young, a promise to protect, a promise he feared he was losing the ability to keep. She looked between them slowly, her heart pounding for reasons she didn't yet understand. Something inside her whispered that this moment mattered, that her life had been drifting without direction for years, and suddenly, two children in ragged clothes had stepped into her world and held out a different path. She took a slow breath and softened her voice. Why don't we go somewhere warm? She said gently. You can tell me everything there, okay? Ethan hesitated, glancing at his sister before nodding. Laura stood from the bench and motioned toward the small cafe across the plaza, its windows glowing warmly against the gray afternoon. Come with me, she said softly. And together she led them toward the cafe to hear the rest of their story. The cafe door closed behind them with a soft chime, shutting out the harsh Colorado wind and wrapping them in the warmth of roasted coffee beans and quiet conversations. Fairy lights framed the windows, creating a golden glow that softened the edges of the world outside. Laura guided the children toward a small corner booth away from the bustle, giving them a sense of privacy. They slid into the seats cautiously, as though unsure whether they truly belonged in such a comfortable space. A server approached. Melissa Carter, a woman in her early 40s with a warm, round face, soft, hazel eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, and curly auburn hair pulled into a loose bun. She wore a burgundy apron over a black shirt, and her movements carried the gentle patience of someone who had worked with all kinds of people. She glanced at the children and immediately softened, her voice a low, soothing tone. Cold day to be out? Can I get you two something warm? Hot chocolate, maybe? Her kindness made Lily shrink slightly behind Ethan, shy but comforted. Laura nodded. Yes, please, 3 hot chocolates. Melissa smiled and stepped away, leaving the 3 alone again. Ethan sat with his back straight, hands folded tightly in his lap. Lily held her stuffed rabbit close, rubbing her thumb against its worn ear. Laura watched them for a moment, struck by their fragile posture, children who had learned to take up as little space as possible. It's warm here, Lily whispered as though surprised. Laura offered her a gentle smile. You're safe here, sweetheart. The words left her mouth before she even realized she had spoken them. Something in Lily's wide blue eyes made her feel fiercely protective. Melissa returned with 3 steaming mugs, whipped cream melting slowly into the chocolate. Ethan murmured a thank you, while Lily wrapped both hands around her cup, letting the warmth seep into her cold fingers. After a long moment, Laura took a steady breath. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Ethan's gaze dropped to his hands. When he spoke, his voice held a gravity that belonged to someone far older. "Dad got sick 8 months ago. Real sick." He swallowed hard. "He worked construction. Fell once, hurt his back real bad. After that, he couldn't work the same. Then he got sick inside too. He kept saying he'd get better, but..." His voice cracked, though he tried to hide it. Laura's heart clenched. "And your mom?" she asked gently. Lily answered this time, her voice fragile. "She left. A year ago. She said she needed time. She never came back." She hugged her rabbit tightly. "Dad cried a lot after she left." Ethan continued, staring into his cup. "After Dad died, they took us to the shelter. It's okay there. Sometimes. But they said there's no space anymore. They said they might send us someplace else. 2 different places." His jaw trembled. "They said sometimes they don't keep kids together." Laura felt a rush of emotion rise up inside her. She looked at Ethan's 2 serious eyes and Lily's trembling fingers, and something in her chest tightened painfully. "I don't need things," Ethan said suddenly, meeting her gaze with heartbreaking honesty. "I don't care about toys or fancy stuff. I just need to stay with Lily. If they take her somewhere else, she'll cry every night." He forced himself to straighten. "I promised Dad I'd take care of her. I have to keep that promise." Laura pressed her hand gently against her chest, steadying herself. She had known loneliness, deep, quiet, constant, but theirs was different. Theirs carried fear, desperation, a fight to stay together in a world that kept pulling them apart. She exhaled slowly. "I want to understand something," she said softly. "Why did you think I might be the right person to ask?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at his sister. Lily leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a breath. "Because you look sad like us." The words struck Laura like a blow, soft but unerring. In a single sentence, Lily had peeled back layers of polished professionalism and seen the truth underneath. Laura looked down at her hands. She hadn't meant to look sad. She hadn't meant for her emptiness to show. But maybe it had always been there. Quiet, unnoticed, but visible to someone who knew what loneliness looked like. Ethan shifted anxiously. "If you can't, it's okay," he said quickly, afraid he'd asked too much. "We just didn't know who else to ask." Laura lifted her gaze, meeting both pairs of hopeful, frightened eyes. Her mind raced with every hesitation she had ever carried. She was single, her job consumed her time. She had never raised a child, let alone 2. She didn't know how to braid hair, soothe nightmares, or help with homework. She didn't know how to be a mother. But she did know what it meant to feel alone. She drew a slow breath, steadying the storm inside her. "I don't know what I can promise yet," she admitted honestly. "But I want to understand more. I want to make sure you're safe. And I promise I won't let anything happen to you without trying to help." Lily's lower lip quivered. Ethan stared at her, stunned, hope flickering to life in his tired eyes. Laura felt the weight of the moment settle around her like a mantle she had never expected to wear. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. Laura drove with both hands tight on the steering wheel, her heart pounding harder than it had during any board meeting she had ever led. The sky outside had darkened further, the gray clouds rumbling low as though echoing the tension inside the car. In the back seat, Ethan and Lily sat close together, their small hands clasped tightly. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Their silence carried fear, hope, and exhaustion all at once. When they reached the temporary shelter, the building looked even more worn than Laura remembered from the few times she had passed it on her drive to work. The structure was a squat, rectangular block of brick, its outer paint faded by sun and wind. A flickering porch light buzzed above the entrance. Inside, the lobby was cramped but clean, decorated with mismatched chairs and posters about community programs. The space smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. A woman stepped out from behind the counter when she saw them enter. Janet Hollings, a social worker in her early 50s, approached with a steady, experienced gait. She was a tall, slightly broad-shouldered woman, with wispy, gray-streaked hair pinned into a tidy bun. Deep smile lines surrounded her dark brown eyes, though the sadness of her work had carved faint shadows beneath them. Her gray cardigan and simple black slacks gave her the appearance of someone who valued practicality over flair. Her voice, when she spoke, held warmth but also a tired honesty, someone who had seen more heartbreak than she cared to admit. "Ethan, Lily," Janet greeted gently, crouching a little so she could look at them eye to eye. "You're back earlier than usual." Then she turned to Laura, her expression curious. "And you must be—" "Laura Bennett," Laura replied, trying to steady her voice. "We met briefly on the phone last month about a donation program." Janet nodded, then glanced at the two children. "Why don't we sit down?" She gestured to a small office nearby, cramped, with a desk covered in paperwork and a single lamp casting a warm glow. The children sat together on a small couch, while Laura and Janet took seats opposite them. Janet folded her hands. "Ethan told me someone kind helped them today," she said gently. "But I need to understand what exactly happened." Laura explained everything: the meeting on the bench, the children's plea, and their fear of being separated. Janet listened with a steady, compassionate expression, but her sigh when Laura finished held something heavy. "It's not that we want to separate them," Janet said quietly. "We're just running out of space. The system doesn't prioritize keeping older siblings together unless a foster family specifically asks for both." Ethan stiffened. Lily leaned into his shoulder, her eyes wide with dread. "And for cases like theirs," Janet continued, "there aren't many who do." Laura felt the weight of that truth press against her chest. Janet added, "Any adult who wants to take them in would need to go through background checks, home inspections, training, and several interviews." She looked at Laura with gentle realism. "It's not a quick process, and it's not easy." Laura's gaze drifted to the children. Ethan sat with his jaw clenched, trying to look brave. Lily's small fingers were woven into her brother's sleeve, gripping tightly. Every time Janet mentioned the possibility of separation, the girl's eyes filled with silent fear. Laura swallowed. Is there anything that can be done to keep them together while someone applies?" Janet nodded slowly. "If someone officially declares the intent to foster both children, we can put a temporary hold on the separation until the process is decided." Ethan's head lifted sharply. Hope flickered in his eyes, tentative, trembling, but alive. But Laura didn't respond. Not immediately. She wasn't sure she could. The truth was, despite how deeply she already cared, She was terrified. She was single. She worked long hours. She had built an entire life around structure and professional stability. Children, especially children with trauma, would turn that life upside down. After the meeting, Laura walked the children back to the lobby. They had to stay for the night. Regulations demanded it. When they reached the door, Lily tugged her sleeve gently. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. Her voice had the delicate tremble of someone afraid the answer might shatter her. Laura opened her mouth, but no words came. She couldn't promise something she wasn't certain about. She couldn't lie to their faces. She pressed a hand to Lily's cheek instead, whispering, "Sleep well, sweetheart." But Lily knew, Ethan knew, Janet knew, Laura wasn't sure. That night, Laura returned to her apartment, the city lights reflecting against her windows. She set her keys on the counter and stood in the quiet darkness of her living room. The silence felt different now, heavier than ever. She kept seeing Lily's hopeful eyes, Ethan's trembling resolve. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. At 2:30, she sat up. At 3, she finally switched on the lamp beside her bed, her heart pounding. She knew the truth. She had never wanted anything more. The next morning, long before the sun rose, Laura walked back into the shelter. Janet looked up from her paperwork, startled. Laura took a deep breath, her voice steady for the first time in hours. "I want to take them," she said. "Both of them, as a foster placement first. I want to try being their mother." Ethan, hearing her voice from the hallway, stepped into view, and for the first time since she met him, the boy cried. The morning Laura brought Ethan and Lily home was colder than usual, the kind of cold that crept beneath clothes and bit at fingertips. Standing in the hallway outside her apartment, she felt a sudden rush of nerves as she unlocked the door. This was her home. Quiet, tidy, controlled, and now 2 small lives were about to enter it, bringing their memories, fears, and hopes with them. When the door swung open, the warm scent of vanilla candles drifted out, mixing awkwardly with the anxiety tightening her chest. The apartment was modern and minimalist, furnished in soft creams and muted grays. It looked like a space belonging to a woman who relied on order to keep loneliness from feeling too loud. Ethan stepped inside first, scanning the space cautiously. He walked with the careful posture of someone used to unpredictable environments, mentally mapping exits and corners before relaxing. Lily followed with small, hesitant steps, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest, her blue eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "This is nice," Ethan said politely, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his unease. "You don't have to pretend," Laura replied gently. "It's okay if it feels strange. It'll take time." Lily nodded quietly. Her small hand reached for Ethan's sleeve, her instinctive anchor in every new situation. Laura gave them a brief tour. The living room, the small kitchen with its neatly arranged cookware, the bathroom stocked with fresh towels. When she opened the door to the bedroom prepared for the children, she watched their reactions closely. She had bought 2 simple beds, soft blankets, and a dresser for each of them. A few stuffed animals sat on the shelves, uncertain but hopeful additions. Lily's breath hitched at the sight of her own bed, complete with a pastel blanket decorated with tiny stars. This is for me?" Her voice trembled in awe, not disbelief. "Yes," Laura said, her own heart tightening. "Just for you." The first night was harder than she had imagined. Lily grew anxious as soon as the lights dimmed. Though she tried to be brave, Small whimpers escaped her every time the house creaked or shadows shifted. Eventually, she climbed into Ethan's bed, curling into his side. Ethan didn't complain. He held her like he always had, offering quiet reassurance in the darkness. Laura, standing outside the door, felt a stab of guilt. She wanted to comfort them, but she didn't know how to replace years of fear with safety overnight. Meals were another challenge. On their first morning together, the smell of burnt toast filled the kitchen as Laura attempted to make breakfast. She had always relied on takeout or simple meals for herself, but now she wanted to cook something warm for the children. Ethan offered to help, though he stood back cautiously, unsure if he was allowed in the kitchen without permission. When she set the plates on the table, scrambled eggs that were slightly too firm and toast that leaned toward charcoal, Lily's face lit up anyway. Ethan, however, immediately slid half of his portion onto Lily's plate when he thought Laura wasn't looking. Laura frowned gently. "Ethan, sweetheart, you don't have to give your food away." He stiffened. "It's okay. Lily needs it more. You need it too." Her voice softened. "Both of you will always have enough here." Ethan hesitated, then nodded slowly, though she could see years of scarcity still lived inside him. Over the following days, small rhythms began to take shape. Laura learned to braid Lily's hair, though her first attempts were clumsy and resulted in uneven strands that Lily nonetheless adored. She learned which detergent didn't irritate Ethan's sensitive skin, and which foods Lily wouldn't eat unless Ethan tried them first. In return, the children learned to trust her routines, her voice, and the promise that she would always return home at the end of the day. One afternoon, she decided to take them shopping for new clothes. The department store was warm and bright, decorated with glittering holiday displays. A kind sales associate, Ryan Callan, a tall young man in his late 20s with sandy brown hair, sharp cheekbones, and a friendly smile, helped them find the right sizes. Ryan had an easy, upbeat personality shaped by years of working retail, and he chatted with the children gently, sensing their shyness. Lily hid behind Laura's leg at first, but Ethan warmed to Ryan's patient explanations about shoe sizes and coat materials. The small outing ended with Ethan picking a navy jacket and Lily choosing a soft pink sweater she refused to take off. Little victories accumulated. Ethan returned to school with Laura's help arranging enrollment, and his teachers reported that he listened attentively and performed well, though he tended to stay close to the edges of social groups. Lily, meanwhile, spent afternoons drawing at the living room table. One day she tugged Laura's sleeve and shyly showed her a picture. 3 figures holding hands. The tallest one had long brown hair. The smallest one had a stuffed rabbit in her arm. "That's us," Lily said softly. "Our family." Laura had to blink rapidly to keep her composure. Laughter began to fill the apartment, soft at first, then louder, more confident. Baking cookies became their weekend ritual, with flour covering the counter and smudging Lily's nose. Ethan found joy in helping measure ingredients, and even Laura began to relax into the chaos. One quiet evening, as they sat together after dinner, Ethan spoke up suddenly. "I'm sorry if we're making things hard for you." Laura looked up from the dishes. "Why would you think that?" "Because..." He swallowed. "I know you're trying really hard, and I know you could have said no, but you didn't. And I just want you to know, I know you won't leave us." The words hit her with a force she didn't expect. She set the towel aside, walked to the couch, and gently wrapped her arms around both children. Ethan stiffened in surprise at first, but Lily melted into the embrace. Eventually, Ethan did too. It was the first time she held them both, and the moment she realized she loved them already. 6 months passed more quickly than Laura expected, each day carrying a mixture of joy, responsibility, fear, and discovery. Her apartment, once pristine and quiet, had transformed into a living space filled with crayon drawings on the fridge, mismatched socks in the laundry basket, and tiny footsteps running across hardwood floors. The silence that once weighed heavily on her now felt like a stranger. Her home echoed with laughter, arguments over bedtime, and requests for snacks. In those 6 months, she had become someone new without even realizing it. The preparation for foster to adopt approval was long and taxing. Her life was examined in ways she had never anticipated: financial stability, emotional readiness, background checks, home inspections. She attended parenting classes where she learned from instructors like Margaret Fields, a retired kindergarten teacher in her 60s with silver hair tied into a low braid and a warm, slightly raspy voice shaped by decades of reading stories to children. Margaret was petite, but carried herself with firm gentleness. She guided Laura through trauma-informed parenting, offering wisdom earned through years of caring for vulnerable children. "Love is important," Margaret often said, her soft blue eyes steady. "But structure is love too. Kids who've known chaos need both." Laura also had regular visits from caseworker Daniel Reyes, a man in his early 40s with neatly trimmed black hair, tan skin, and a calm, reassuring demeanor. He wore simple button-down shirts and carried a battered leather satchel full of paperwork and colored folders. Daniel had a gentle way of speaking, shaped by his years working with families in crisis, and he had a natural habit of listening first before asking questions. He watched Laura with Ethan and Lily over several home checks, quietly noting the bonds forming between them. When spring finally arrived, the mountains surrounding Boulder were capped with white while the lowlands bloomed with early wildflowers. The morning of the adoption hearing dawned crisp and bright, sunlight spilling through Laura's curtains like a promise. Ethan wore a clean navy shirt and khaki pants that made him look startlingly grown. His dark hair had been combed carefully, though one stubborn strand refused to lie flat. Lily twirled in her pastel dress, the skirt blooming around her like a small flower. She held her stuffed rabbit, now cleaned and patched, tightly under one arm. Laura herself wore a soft cream blouse beneath a tailored jacket, something that balanced warmth and confidence. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she helped tie the ribbon in Lily's hair. "I look okay?" she asked softly. "You look like a mama," Lily whispered, her small voice full of certainty that Laura still struggled to believe she deserved. They arrived at the local Colorado courthouse mid-morning. The building was a tall, rectangular structure of beige stone, its glass entrance reflecting the sky. Inside, the hallways were quiet, the air humming with the soft click of heels on tile and the distant murmur of legal conversations. The courtroom assigned to them was small and sunlit, with wooden benches and a judge's desk polished to a deep sheen. The presiding judge, Judge Carol Whitmore, entered with a professional grace. She was a woman in her late 50s, tall and lean, with short silver hair styled in neat waves. Her sharp gray eyes held both authority and compassion, shaped by decades of handling sensitive family cases. She wore the standard black robe, but her expression softened slightly when she saw the children. Judge Whitmore adjusted her glasses and glanced at the paperwork before her. Her voice, clear but gentle, filled the room. "Ms. Bennett, today we are here to finalize the adoption petition regarding the minors Ethan and Lily Parker. Before we proceed, I must ask you directly." She looked up, meeting Laura's eyes with searching seriousness. "Are you certain of this decision? Adoption is a lifelong commitment." Laura reached for the children's hands, Ethan on her right, Lily on her left. She felt their small fingers curl instinctively around hers. In that moment, the fear she had carried for months dissolved into certainty. "Yes," Laura said. "I'm sure. I want to keep them together, and I want them with me." Ethan blinked quickly, his breath catching. Lily leaned into Laura's side, whispering one word with complete, unshakable trust. "Mama." Laura felt tears sting her eyes. Judge Whitmore nodded, softened. Then, with the authority of the state of Colorado, "It is my honor to grant the adoption. Congratulations, Miss Bennett. Or should I say, Mrs. Bennett, mother of two." The gavel came down with a soft, final tap. It felt like the beginning of the rest of their lives. Ethan walked forward to receive the official documents from Daniel, who smiled proudly. The boy accepted the papers with trembling hands, staring at them as though they were something magical. His voice broke as he turned to Laura. "Thank you for saying yes that day." Lily wrapped her arms around Laura's waist, her cheek pressed against her blouse. "We're really a family now," she whispered. Laura rested a hand on each child's back, overwhelmed by a swell of love she had never known. The years she had spent chasing success suddenly felt hollow compared to the joy filling her now. She had built a career of prestige, power, and accolades, but none had ever touched her heart the way these two small souls did. Outside, the spring breeze lifted Lily's hair and carried the smell of blooming trees. Ethan walked close to Laura, no longer out of fear, but because he finally felt he belonged. For the first time in her life, Laura realized she wasn't walking alone. She had spent half her life building a future, and two once-lost children had shown her how to build a family. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come with thunder, lightning, or flashes of heavenly light. Sometimes, they arrive softly, disguised in a cold afternoon, wrapped in a worn coat, holding a stuffed rabbit, and asking a stranger, "Can you be our family?" In Laura's life, the miracle was not an event. It was two children who walked toward her with trembling hope and a quiet voice inside her heart, placed there by God, whispering, "Say yes." And when she did, everything changed. God doesn't always move mountains in front of us. Sometimes He moves our hearts. Sometimes He guides two lost children to the right bench, at the right moment, toward the one person who needed them just as much as they needed her. That is how heaven works. Quietly, gently, perfectly timed. And maybe, just maybe, He's been doing the same in your life, in ways you haven't noticed yet, through the strangers you meet, through the people who cross your path for no reason, through the unexpected moments that feel like more than coincidence, moments that feel like grace. If this story touched your heart today, remember this: miracles still happen. God still writes stories, and love is still the greatest proof of His presence. So hold your family a little closer. Be kind to the people you meet, and trust that God is working behind the scenes, even in the quietest parts of your life. If this story moved you, please leave a comment. Share your thoughts or your own miracle story. Like this video, it helps more people find these messages of hope. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of love, faith, and healing. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that God is still with them. May God bless you. May He watch over your home. And may He fill your heart with peace, healing, and unexpected miracles. just like the one he gave to Laura, Ethan, and Lily. God bless you and your family.